Rosh Hashana Daf Kaf Bet. We will be completing the first perek and starting the second. But no worries, they actually flow right into each other because both perakim are talking about being mekadesh the chodesh, where ask witnesses wherever they are to come to Jerusalem should they see the new moon, so that they can testify. Because the Bet Din, even if they know how to calculate and it's obvious, nevertheless they have to go through the process, hearing witnesses, and then when they accept it, they say mikudash, mikudash. Okay, so we're learning here that the witnesses can even travel on Shabbat. An amazing halacha that this overrides even Shabbat, because it's that important to, number one, get the date right, especially if it's during the holidays, if it'll affect that. During the time of the Bet HaMikdash, you had to make sure to do the Korban Musaf of Rosh Chodesh on the right date. So therefore, we even violate Shabbat. And now we're going to add another chidush to this. Here's a new case. Mishnah. Av ubeno shira'u et hachodesh. A father and son are out while taking a walk at night, and they see, oh, look at that, the new moon. Or maybe late afternoon. Usually they would see it around sunset. And they both see the new moon. Yelchu. They should both go. Lo shemistarfin ze im ze. Not that they can join up together, because in general, a father and son, or relatives in general, cannot join together as witnesses. They're relatives, and so you can't trust relatives to be witnesses together. That's a halacha now. We have to find people are not related at a wedding. Sometimes it's hard. Everybody's related. So ella shimi pasel had mehen yistaref hashani imacher. Rather, reason why they both go is because should one of them become disqualified, maybe there's another pair of people that one of them becomes disqualified. And so in that case, you can mix and match and take, let's say, just the father and take one from the other pair. And now we have two that we can rely on. So this is even a bigger chidush. Even though there's no way we're going to accept this father and son as witnesses, nevertheless, they violate Shabbat and travel just in case one of them might be necessary. And we don't know which one, because maybe the father will be pasul and the son will be okay, or the other way around. All right. So for this reason and others, I think that there's more to the story than simply having witnesses to know. But we're going to see the polemical side of it again soon. So in this case, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Avu beno v'chol kirubin kesherin la'edut hachodesh. So Tanna Kama says no. We're going to see Tanna Kama has the opinion of Rabbi Yosef also. Rabbi Shimon, however, that's Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He says a father and son and any relatives, they're fine for Kiddush HaChodesh. We're not talking about monetary things where, maybe I would conspire with my brother to try to falsely accuse someone. In this case, that they don't get any personal benefit. So therefore, yes, we can rely on witnesses according to Rabbi Shimon. And now we have a story. Stories are unusual in the Mishnah. So anytime you do have a story, it's probably very important. Amar Rabbi Yosef. Dr. Good, that's his name means, saw the new moon in Jerusalem. Not only he saw it with his son and also with his freed servant. That would be that person was not Jewish and was taken on as an Eved Kana'ani. And Eved Kana'ani who is freed becomes fully Jewish. So it's like a conversion. So basically, this is someone who converted to Judaism, which, really would be a Jew for basically all reasons. So these three people all saw the moon together, and they all came to Jerusalem. This is absolutely fascinating. You see, there's two groups of people that greet the three witnesses. First, they come to Kohanim, and then they go to the Bet Din. So who are these Kohanim? They are some group that's separate from the Bet Din. I would think that who's in charge in the Bet HaMikdash, who's in charge in this whole legal process, it would just be the Bet Din. But there seems to be another group of Kohanim that they came and said, oh, you know what? We accept you and your son, but not the slave. Now remember, he's not actually a slave. He was freed, so he's okay. But it would make some sense that Kohanim, groups of Jews, we know that the sectarians, like the Sadducees, they were mostly Kohanim. And Kohanim, they become Kohanim because of lineage. Kohanim always emphasize lineage. You have to be from the right family. And so for them, father and son, that's okay. But the slave / convert, that's from a different, they were born from a different family. So in general, Kohanim were not so favorable to conversion or accepting anything from slaves. So it makes sense that Kohanim would do that. And makes me wonder whether these Kohanim are in some way a hint or related to some of the sectarian groups. In this case, you don't have to say that because the Kohanim actually agree with Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says you accept the father and son, so they also do. Although Rabbi Shimon says you don't accept. Rabbi Shimon does not say that you reject the freed slave. And these Kohanim do reject the freed slave. Anyway, that Kohanim seem to be interviewing them first, but then eventually they move down the line and they come to the actual Bet Din, and the Bet Din say the opposite. They say, you and the freed slave are totally fine. Because why not? That's, two Jews. They're not related or anything. And they said the father and son, the son is no good. That's to their family. So in other words, the Bet Din is using the normal rules of witness testimony. Okay, that's the Mishnah. Now, Amad Rabbi Levi, my Tamad Rabbi Shimon. What is the source for Rabbi Shimon that says you can accept a father and son relatives for Kiddush HaChodesh? Tichtiv, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe ve'el Aaron be'eretz Mitzrayim lemor. HaChodesh hazeh lachem, Edut zo teheh keshera bachem. So pasuk, the main pasuk that we learned that Nisan is the first month, and here Hashem tells Moshe and Aaron, he says HaChodesh hazeh, and the word hazeh is always understood in Midrash to be pointing to something that's in front of them, and said this: if you ever see a moon that looks like this new moon of Nisan, then you'll know that's Rosh Chodesh. And he gives it to them, lachem. Who's he talking to? Moshe and Aaron. Moshe and Aaron are brothers. So for you prove from this that even brothers can be witnesses to a new moon, and so to a father, son, or anybody else. Okay, very interesting proof. V'Rabbanan. So now the question to the other rabbis, the Bet Din, what would they say about this pasuk, right? Isn't it is in fact given to brothers? So they would answer, Edut zo tehem mesura lachem. No, what they're saying is that this testimony is given over to you meaning human beings, that it's up to you to go and look at the moon and try to find it and decide whether this is today's Rosh Chodesh or tomorrow's is Rosh Chodesh. In other words, the answer is not going to be an absolute up in heaven. It's given over to you to figure it out. But you means anyone who is authorized to be in charge, to be a witness and then to be a judge, but not specifically you two as witnesses. So it's more general. I mean, that probably is the Peshat. This is, a law for you, for all Bnei Israel. Okay, good. Now, what is the halacha l'maaseh? Amar Rabbi Yosef, maaseh b'tubi arofeh, that's the story. Amar Rav Hanan bar Rava, hilcheta keRabbi Shimon. Rav Hanan bar Rava says we should follow Rabbi Shimon and allow a father and son, relatives, to be witnesses, which is pretty unusual. Amar le Rav Huna le Rav Hanan bar Rava, Rabbi Yosef u'maaseh. So this Rav Hanan is challenged by Rav Huna, who says, look at the Mishnah. The Mishnah mentioned Rabbi Shimon, it's true, but then it followed up with Rabbi Yosef, who brought the story. So why is the Mishnah bringing this? It sounds like it's bringing the story to be authoritative, and it's quoted by Rabbi Yosef. In general, when you have a halacha, a dispute between Rabbi Yosef and a colleague, halacha is like Rabbi Yosef. There was a rule like that in Masechet Eruvin. And so therefore, you have not only Rabbi Yosef saying it, but also a whole story of what they actually did. And the Bet Din did not accept relatives. So it looks like from the Mishnah that halacha should not be Rabbi Shimon. All right, so he's challenging Rav Hanan's opinion. Rav Hanan defends himself. Amar lo, v'hazim nin sagin amarit kamed derav, hilcheta keRabbi Shimon. Vela amar li vela midi. So Rav Hanan says, many times I was studying in front of Rav, the first generation from Bavel, the great master of the generation, and many times when I was learning with him, I said in front of him, the law is like Rabbi Shimon in this case, that relatives are fine. And they never corrected me. So from the fact they didn't correct me means he agrees. So that's what I'm relying on. Amar le, Rav Huna, however, says, Hechi tanit, hold on. How do you read the Mishnah? All right, tell me the whole girsah that you have in the Mishnah. Amar le ipecha, the opposite of you. In other words, Rav Hanan had the opinions opposite. He said that this is Rabbi Yosef, who said relatives are okay, and this is Rabbi Shimon, who quoted the story that relatives are not okay. So since he said the opposite, now we understand when he said in front of Rav, halacha is like Rabbi Shimon, right? Since he had an opposite girsah, he was actually right. So he was actually saying the opposite, that halacha is like the last opinion, that relatives are not allowed, and that's why Rav did not correct him. Right, because when you recited the Mishnah, you switched the opinions, and then you said halacha is like Rabbi Shimon. Rav didn't bother to correct you because you were following the correct halacha that that relatives are no good. All right, so that's really interesting. You got to agree on the terms first and who said what. Then you can figure out who to say what halacha is. All right, so bottom line here at this point is that relatives are no good. And then we have one more opinion. Amar tavi bere demari tavi. Amar morukva. Amar Shemuel. Halcheta Rabbi Shimon. So halcha is like Rabbi Shimon. The thing about this last line is we don't know when he said this, which version of the Mishnah he had. Did he have Rabbi Shimon like we have it, who says relatives are okay, or Rabbi Shimon the opposite way, that relatives are not okay? It's not clear here. In any case, the Rishonim here say halacha is like the one who says relatives are no good, and so I guess you would read this as yes, it was switched around, and relatives are not okay. We follow the betin and not the opinion of those kohanim. All right, excellent. And now next Mishnah, Elu hena pesulin. This Mishnah has nothing to do with the Kiddush HaChodesh, but now that since you mentioned some relatives and the slave who are not invalid witnesses, here's another group of invalid witnesses. Hamesachek be'kubiya. Kubiya is the Hebrew here, which is equivalent to cube. Cube meaning dice. So anyone who plays with dice cannot be a witness. Okay, it doesn't just mean throwing dice. It means sitting and gambling, as they would do. Looks like this is an actual Roman sketch. Looks like they're playing backgammon here. Okay, so I do ask before witnesses at a wedding, before we choose witnesses, I asked if they are gamblers. And so, one guy once said, well, I play the stock market, so I didn't let him be a witness. Okay, just kidding. So someone who does that, no good. Why? Because gambling is kind of like stealing, even though you're not physically, breaking into someone's house and robbing them. Nevertheless, when people play, put the money. When people play, they expect to win. So if someone loses, then they're giving over the money, but kind of unwillingly, like, oh, that's not fair. You took my money. It still feels a grudge. He's not really giving the money. So the person that wins is technically taking money that was not fully given to him totally willingly. So that's the idea. So therefore, if you gamble and always lose, you could still be a witness. All right, malveh beribit, those who lend money with interest. It's not allowed. You're not allowed to take interest. So if someone takes interest, they're taking money that they are not allowed to take. And so therefore, that is also kind of like stealing. Mafriche yonim, pigeon racers, another kind of betting. So during a Shivi'it year, which we're in right now, one is allowed to go out into the field and take everything as hefker and take for oneself, but you can't store it up and sell it, do commerce. If you do that, then you're stealing. And so that's another form of stealing. All these are gezela midrabanan. You're not physically taking something out of someone's pocket, but it is still the same. And so therefore, that kind of person is not trustworthy to be a witness. So you can't trust them to be honest. So no good. Question?
So if you're a banker, you can't be a witness now? I mean, seriously.
Banker, if you're an honest banker, then you can be a witness. If you're a dishonest banker, then no.
No, but you're malveh beribit.
Oh, well, you're not allowed to be malveh beribit. If it's dealing with non-Jews, then it's okay. That's the standard business practice. If it's dealing with Jews, and then you have to write a contract that says, "Oh, we are partners in this," and then some of the profits end up being instead of the interest, we're partners. So it's a standard form. You can ask your local rabbi if you do need to do that, and there are Jewish banks that do in fact use things like that. Or Moshe Feinstein's many teshuvot about how a corporation can work. Is a corporation a person? Can a corporate entity lend with interest? So this is a huge halacha. And yes, if you're involved in any kind of finance, you should make sure that you're practicing it according to halacha. Good. Even if you don't want to be a witness, it's a separate halacha.
But realistically speaking, if somebody's working at Goldman Sachs, they don't know what the bank lends to. So that should actually disqualify them from being witnesses.
Right. So then you have to see if because it's a corporation. So the corporate entity is separate from the person.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Right. Va'avadim, and also slaves. Ze'akilal. Kol edut she'en ha'isha keshera la, af hen enan kesherin la. And here's a general rule: all these category of people that cannot be witnesses. That's true in general. Anything that a woman cannot testify to, they also cannot testify to. So it's actually limiting it, saying they can testify to some things. A woman cannot testify regarding most things, crime and whatever, but they can testify to say, I saw that this person was dead, and therefore that person's wife is allowed to go and marry. So even if it's a single a person, one witness, or a woman, or if it's any of these categories, they are believed regarding certain categories of testimony. And so that would be equivalent across the board there. Question, Ha'isha keshera la, afhen kesherin la. Not a question, but this is implication. So since if anything that a woman is allowed to, so too the other group is allowed to. Amar Rav Asher, zot omeret gazlan de divrehen kesherin la'edut ishan. We learn from here that someone who is a rabbinic thief, that doesn't mean he steals from rabbis. He means he violates stealing mid-rabbanan, not actual stealing, but like these categories of gamblers. They can give testimony that a woman may remarry because they saw that the husband was dead. So this is just bringing out from the Mishnah what's already implied there. All right, and last Mishnah of the Perek. We're now even more expanding the types of people that can violate Shabbat. Someone saw the new moon and he cannot walk. He's handicapped, or he's elderly and can't walk so far. So we put him on an animal and he rides the animal, or we put him in a bed, a stretcher, and we carry him there. So this shows that you can violate not only a melacha of Tichum Shabbat, but even riding an animal, all kinds of halachot, whatever you have to do, because this guy, he can't walk, but he has to get to Bet Din to make sure. Maybe he's the only one. This is my favorite line of the whole thing. If there are people lying in wait for them to attack them, then they're allowed to carry clubs to defend themselves. Now, what are you talking about? Who is attacking the witnesses? They're not carrying money because it's Shabbat, so they don't have anything with them. Who are these enemies? She explains they are the Sadducees and Samaritans. The other groups that follow the solar calendar, they would constantly try to disrupt the rabbis and their system of the lunar calendar, because they want the solar. And therefore, they would lie in wait. They would see, oh, look at that guy. See, he's traveling on Shabbat. He looks like a rabbinic guy, and he must be going to testify. And they go attack them. So now the witnesses can counterattack, and they're allowed to violate Shabbat by carrying in public domain, which is for sure melacha deoraita, in order to defend themselves. So this gives you just a little hint of how heated and even violent this controversy was, and why the rabbis would have to be so strong in making sure that it kept going against those who were trying to attack it. If there's a far walk and they're going to get hungry on the way, they can take food, even though that's also going to be violating carrying. Because you're allowed to travel as much as a day and night's walk. The point is that if you see the new moon on Friday afternoon, well, if you can get there before Shabbat is over, before the next day, then the Bet Din can still question and accept it and declare that day to be to be Rosh Chodesh. They can declare it anytime during the day. If you're so far away, it's going to take you 28 hours to get there, then don't bother, because it's already the first Rosh Chodesh will already have passed, and necessarily they will make Rosh Chodesh. If they don't say it, if Betin doesn't say it, it doesn't become Rosh Chodesh. So then necessarily the 31st day will be Rosh Chodesh. Shene'emar, the Mishnah ends with the pasuk. This is a proof text that you can even violate Shabbat. It's so important because we have to get the holidays right. These are the holidays of Hashem, the ones that you call at the right time. So therefore, since you have to get it at the right time, and the pasuk says so, so therefore we have to do everything, all the steps that will be necessary to get there are also required. And we saw there was a Braita that quoted this above and drew out that lesson. All right, so Hadran alach arba'ad asher shanim. We will return to this perek of the 4 heads of the year. There is no Gemara on this Mishnah. Instead, we go directly to the second perek. Im enan makirin oto meshadachin imo acher leha'ido. You see, the second perek flows right from the first. And here, if the witnesses come to the Betin in Jerusalem and they don't know who they are, right? They're not familiar. What's that last name? What family are you? We don't know you. They don't know if they could trust them. Well, because in other words, maybe they are sectarians. Maybe these are some Sadducees that are trying to maneuver and trick the rabbis and give false testimony to mess up the system. So unless we know who you are, we don't accept it. So therefore, so then if you live in Modi'in and 2 people there say we saw the moon, but they're unknown people, they don't know to trust them. The rabbi of the city or other important people that the Betin knows can also travel even on Shabbat to the Betin. So now you see there's 2 witnesses and another guy also to be the character witness to those guys saying, yeah, they're okay. The Gemara will talk about how many character witnesses do you need. Here it says acher, sounds like 1 person, but maybe you would need 2 people to be character witnesses for them. That'll be the conclusion. Story. At first, it used to be that they would accept testimony from anyone, because why not? Anyone who sees it, that's good. But when the Beit Tosim messed everything up, Beit Tosim is another name for the sectarians or another subgroup of sectarians. They are pretty much interchangeable with the Sadducees. Anytime you see one, then it's hard to tell the difference. But you can ask Rabbi Raymond Harari, wrote his doctoral dissertation on Beit Tosim. So he is the world expert about this. So when these Beit Tosim messed up the system and were untrustworthy, we're going to see a story about this. So then the Betin made a takana that we cannot accept testimony unless we know the people and trust them. And otherwise, they're going to have to send other people to be character witnesses. Okay, question. My acher had, when it says here that they would send another person with them to be a character witness. How many? Just 1 person? Can you believe 1 person? Not usually, no. Here's a story. A certain person came with Aidav, with his witnesses with him to be character witnesses. So you see, in that case, you had 2. Amar Papa, my acher, zug acher. Oh, in the Mishnah, when it says that we send another, not another single person, we send another pair, right? And that you could read it very well. If they don't recognize it, not oto is not him, but it, meaning the pair, then they send another pair of witnesses to be the character witnesses. And that's what we're going to say right now. Hachinami mestabera. This explanation of the Papa really fits very well into the Mishnah. If in that phrase, if they don't recognize him means a single person, well, we wouldn't believe a single person anyway. So Mishpat Ketibeh in the Mizmor of Tehillim that we say on Rosh Hashana says Kichok L'Yisrael Mishpat Elohei Yaakov. In other words, declaring the new moon to celebrate Rosh Hashanah is a mishpat. It's an official law For all official laws, you need two witnesses. Ela may oto hazug hachiname mayached zug acher. So therefore, just like the word oto refers to it, meaning a pair of witnesses, so to the ached is a pair of witnesses. So you can now send two and two, right? You see the Mishnah just now expanding and expanding, right? You have many people. Now you have, we saw before 40 pairs of people came. And so you might have hundreds of people that saw it. And then the people that have to carry them and the character witnesses. It's like, may as well get everybody to just come and testify. And that was the idea. You wanted as many people to be involved as possible to really bring in the whole masses of people. For sure, during the week, let everyone come, and it becomes a huge spectacle. And that's great PR for upholding the rabbinic system. And then the chidush is even on Shabbat you could do that, right? V'chad, that saying that you could do it on Shabbat really just shows how important it is. V'chad la meheman. Now, question: one witness is not reliable. We have a beraita that seems to indicate it is. V'atanya ma'aseh b'Rabbi Nehorai shalach etzel ha'ed le'ha'id la'ala b'Shabbat be'usha. One time, Rav Nehorai went with a witness to testify on Shabbat in Usha. In other words, he was testifying about another way. He was being character witness for someone else. And it says that he went alone. So he was believed to be when he was alone. No, we say, no, you misunderstood the story. Really, someone else went with him. Rabbi Nehorai and someone else, but it didn't mention the other person because of Rabbi Nehorai's honor. Even Rabbi Nehorai, the great rabbi, he went to be a character witness for someone else. So that's showing the greatness of Rabbi Nehorai. So we don't have to mention the other person who was not as important. That's answer number one. Or answer number two. Oh, there was already another. By the way, all this is happening in Usha. Usha was the home, the seat of the Bet Din Hagadol after it left Jerusalem and after it left Yavne because of Bar Kokhba revolt, and they couldn't be in the south at all. Then it went up north to Usha. That's still where the Sanhedrin is. So Rabbi Nehorai, there was already another witness there already to be one character witness. And Rabbi Nehorai is the only one that had to travel because he was far, so he went there. But in fact, there was two witnesses. So either of the answers, there was in fact two witnesses to be character witnesses. And then we ask, so if there was two witnesses, then what's the chidush? Why are you even telling me this story? Who cares that Rabbi Nehorai went to be a character witness? You're not adding any halacha. Oh, it has to teach us that Rabbi Nehorai, when he goes, he's not sure. He's not sure. Is the other guy going to be there? Or even if he's going with him, is the other guy going to be accepted? Am I going to be needed? Are they going to even need this pair of witnesses? He doesn't know for sure. Nevertheless, you can violate Shabbat even if you're in doubt whether your testimony will actually be necessary and accepted. Okay. Ki ata ula. Amar kedeshuha leyarcha b'ma'arava. So Ula, he went back and forth sometimes, and when he went from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel one time, he testified to them and said, "Oh, listen, they sanctified the new moon in Israel on a certain day, so therefore, update your calendars." Now he was alone, and yet he was accepted to give testimony about what the Bet Din did. Amar Rav Kana, lame baya Ula de Gavra Rabbahu meheman. Rav Kana says they didn't accept it because he was Ula and he's such a great person. He is a great person. But truth is, anyone who comes and gives that testimony, they would be believed. You see, this is different than witnesses who are coming to Jerusalem to say they saw the moon. For that, you need two witnesses. It has to be official. Also, to be character witnesses, you'd also have to need two to be official. But this is talking about being a messenger. And it says, I was there and I heard the Bet Din say Mikudash, and now I'm just letting you know what they said. So for that, you don't need two witnesses. Why? My tama. You have a general rule. Anything that will eventually be revealed anyway, a person's not going to lie about, right? I'm not going to go and lie to you about something that in a few hours, you're going to hear it anyway, and then you're going to hear that I'm wrong, right? So nobody would lie about such a thing. So Ula happened to get there first, but probably, tomorrow someone else will come and say, no, that's not true. They didn't do that. And then Ula will look, or anyone who's coming, they'll look like liars. Everybody's like, why'd you tell me that? So you got to say in a true way. Good. In general, people, if someone tells you a story, oh, this person said that, and the person, you could probably rely on that their testimony, because they know you can just go and ask them, and then then you'll realize that it wasn't true. So therefore, you only need one person. And the Braita goes to an extreme to say some person comes from the other side of the world. We don't know who he is, and he said, "Oh, Betin made it this day." We believe that person. Okay. Interesting. We believe them because we do also know that there must have been a lot of people that were trying to mess it up. But Ula is already an Amorah from later on. So by his time, I don't think that there were any sectarians that were active anymore. So then you could believe any random person. But the Mishnah is being written describing Bet HaMikdash times and right after when the sectarians were very much active. And so then you couldn't trust people. Okay, and so going on the Mishnah that they used to believe anyone. And it says once the Beit Tosim came and messed it up, then they couldn't trust anyone who they didn't know, and you had to send character witnesses. So what was the story? It's referring to some event that the Beit Tosim messed something up. Here's the story. One time the Beit Tosim wanted to corrupt the system of the Chachamim. So what they do? See, and by the way, they could be corrupting it, and then and for various reasons. One might be because, according to the sectarians, let's say Shavuot should be on Sunday. So if they see that, they're going to make it such a way that Shavuot is going to be on Saturday, maybe they'll send witnesses so that they will falsely push it up a day or back a day. Let's say it was going to be Monday. So they'd send witnesses to say, the Rosh Chodesh is today, or a day earlier, to make it up a day. So they might do that because the rabbis, Pharisees were in charge in the Bet HaMikdash at that time. And so they wanted to make sure the Bet HaMikdash would follow their calendar. That could be, but you don't have to say that. It could just be that they're giving misinformation, just spreading false news so that people don't trust the entire system altogether. I think that's more likely. So what they do? So the Beit Tosim went and they hired two people for 400 zuz together. One of them was a member of the Pharisees / rabbis, and one of them was a Beit Tosim from their own. And they hired them go and testify falsely to say that you saw the new moon even though you didn't see it. Now, whenever two witnesses come to the Beit Din, they separate them so that they don't hear each other, and they question them. So first the Beit Tosim went, he gave his testimony, and he left. And then the Pharisee / rabbi, he went, Shelanu Amru Lo, Emor Kesadre Levanan. So they asked him the standard question, tell me, how did you see it? Did you see it this way, what shape, where, what? Amar Lehen, and he gives them a really unusual answer. He says, Ole hayiti be'Ma'aleh Adumim. Oh, I was up there and going up the mountain of Ma'aleh Adumim. You can go there now, just outside of Jerusalem. Uritiv Shehud Abutz ben Shenesh Selaim. I saw the moon. It was crouched between two rocks. Rosho Domeh le'egel. Its head was like a calf. It was not the gedi. Its ears were like a kid. Goat. Karnav domot le'sebi. And its horns were like a deer. Okay, what are we talking about? It seems like total nonsense, right? He's talking about a moon. It's just round, or just a sliver. And his tail was between his thighs. And when I saw it, I was so scared of this image that I fell backwards. You could see the judge's face is looking at this guy like he's completely insane. As if you don't believe me, and if you don't believe me, here's 200 zuz that will prove it. In other words, he's more than, hinting kind of explicitly that he was hired to lie. And so therefore he's telling this elaborate lie to show, right? I'm an informer, basically. He's a double agent, and he's telling the Beit Din, yes, they hired me, and they intimidated me, into doing this, but this is a lie, and I'm revealing to you their scheme. So the judges say, "Oh, who put you up to this? Right? Who's responsible?" Says, "Yeah, I heard a rumor going around that the Beit Tosim were made a plot to mislead the sages." So I said, let me volunteer to go and be that person so that I can foil the plot. Because maybe someone else will, who's really a traitor. And they will actually go through with the plot. So I said, let me be a spy, and I will betray them and tell you about it. So, okay, good guy. So the rabbi said, and thank you, and reward for being a good Samaritan. I mean the opposite, being not a Samaritan, but good, right? You can keep the 200 zuz, and those who hired you, may they be tied to a post so that we can give them lashes for doing that. And that was the story, that's the background of the Mishnah. They realized that we can't just trust any witness. Look what happened. They're going to do this again and send this false information, false news. And therefore, they said, we have to know the person before we can accept it. All right, fantastic story. And next Mishnah. So at first they had this amazing system to get the word out. Whenever they would declare today's the new moon, then they would have someone go run up a mountain, and he would wave a we have a picture here. Yeah, wave a torch. And then this torch would be seen on the next mountain over, and they would light their torch, and mountain to mountain. How would they do it? Maybe in kelon sa'ot shel erez arukin. They bring a long cedar pole, and various items that are flammable of different. So it would be the string and the flax would light up easily, and then that would make the rest of it all light up. And they would tie that whole package together with string to make this torch on the top, and they would go to the top of the mountain, and then he'd light it up, and then and then he wave it up and down, side to side. This is the same way we wave a lulav, which happens to be the same way that we wave a korban, like korban ha'omed. But so this is maybe it's kind of like a holy act, but also so that it'll be more visible by moving it. And then the person who's waiting on the second mountain, they wait there all day, whenever the witnesses may come, and then the Bet Din will declare Mekudash. So he's waiting, looking at the first mountain. When he sees it, he lights his up. And so on the third mountain, and it keeps going. What was the pathway? From the Mount of Olives to this place, Baltin. Baltin lo zazu misham el molech umevi male morid ad shaya ro'eh kol hagolan lefanav kimdurat esh. And that was the last stop of Baltin, and they wouldn't go further from there, but rather they'd continue waving, even though they got the message all the way there, because the spectacle was so impressive. You see, it's kind of like, from the hub, from the Bet Din in Jerusalem, there light shines forth, and you can see it growing and going throughout. The growing of the torches almost parallels the growing of the moon, from nothing to a sliver to a growing moon. And this would be so impressive, such a sight, and would really emphasize in the minds of the people the central authority of the Bet Din, and how all of Torah and light and enlightenment comes from there all the way through Israel and even out into Bavel, because in just a few minutes, right, you can travel this far. So here's the place names that it mentioned just now. And you see from here to here would be quite long. So you have to assume that there were also places along the way that in order to do this, but they weren't necessarily set places wherever they put it. And it would go all the way out here to Bavel, where the Babylonian yeshivot and sages were. So really quite amazing that they're able to do this until the Kutim came and messed it up. Right? What they do? They came up some mountain on the wrong day, and they lit up torches. And then the people saw, oh, look, there's a torch. And then they lit it themselves, and they messed up. And then everyone thought it was Rosh Chodesh when in fact it was not. That also happens in the Lord of the Rings. Sorry, the Lord of the Rings movie. The same thing happens. Okay, my mashma. Last line. De masiin lishana dikodhu tichtiv. Vayisaem David va'anashav mutargiminan v'oktinan David. This word masiin, usually that means to lift up, right? Nasa. So why is it over here? It's used to mean to burn. So where do we ever see that it means to burn? And the answer is here. When David and his people conquer the Pilishtim, and the Pilishtim abandoned their idols. It says David va'anashav. David and his men carried them off. Literally means they picked them up and took them. But the Targum there into Aramaic says, Vokdina and David, that they burnt them. So you see from that Targum that the word, this word that means not only to lift up, but also to burn. I guess when you burn things, they also go up in smoke. So it's a related root. And so we'll leave our burning torches there, and we'll learn more about the details of that system on the next stuff. Baruch Adonai L'olam, amen ve'amen.